The foundation, James Thorne, nervously adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror of his beat-up Honda. The university investment competition finals were today, and his innovative financial algorithm needed to impress. As he gathered his presentation, materials, a gentle knock on the window startled him. "You forgot this," Diana Reynolds said, holding up a flash drive. Her warm smile instantly calmed his nerves. "Your backup presentation, just in case technology fails you today." James exhaled, with relief. "You're a lifesaver, Di. I would have been completely lost without this." "That's why we're a team," she replied, squeezing his hand. "Now go show those judges what the future of fintech looks like." That day marked the beginning of their journey together. James with his brilliant financial mind, and Diana with her impeccable organizational skills and unwavering support. When his algorithm won first place and attracted the attention of several venture capitalists, Diana was the one who helped him negotiate his first funding round. In their modest one-bedroom apartment, they spent countless nights developing what would eventually become ThorneTech, a revolutionary financial platform that democratized investment strategies for average consumers. Diana managed their fledgling company's operations while completing her MBA, often sleeping only 4 hours a night. "We're investing in our future," she would say whenever James worried about her exhaustion. "Someday this will all be worth it." 5 years later, their perseverance paid off when ThorneTech went public. The IPO exceeded all expectations, catapulting James into the ranks of tech millionaires overnight. As they stood on the balcony of their new penthouse overlooking the city skyline, Diana wrapped her arms around his waist. "We did it," she whispered. "Remember when we couldn't afford to fix the air conditioning in that tiny apartment?" James laughed, pulling her closer. "And you insisted we put that money into server costs instead." "Best decision we ever made," Diana said, her eyes reflecting the city lights below. Their 10th anniversary celebration at the renowned Bellamy restaurant drew attention from business magazines and social columns alike. James Thorne, now worth over $200 million, had become a household name in the tech industry. Diana, elegantly dressed in a midnight blue gown, remained as grounded as ever, charming everyone with her genuine warmth and intelligence. "To my North Star," James toasted that night, raising his champagne flute. "Diana, none of this would exist without you. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself." The gathered friends and business associates applauded as Diana blushed, unaccustomed to the spotlight despite their growing public profile. Later that evening, she surprised James with a handcrafted album documenting their journey, from university competition photos to their first office space in a converted garage. "So you never forget where we started," she said softly. But success began changing James in subtle ways. The invitations to exclusive clubs and events multiplied, his schedule filled with international conferences and high-profile meetings. Diana noticed his growing preoccupation with their social standing and the company's public image. When ThorneTech opened its new headquarters, a gleaming 40-story building downtown, James insisted on an extravagant launch party. Diana suggested donating part of the budget to education programs instead, something they had always prioritized, but James dismissed her concerns. "We need to project success, Di. It's how business works at this level." That night, among celebrities and business elite, Diana observed her husband from across the room. As he laughed with a group of admirers, she couldn't help but wonder if the humble, passionate man she married was slowly disappearing behind the golden facade they had created together. The fracture. 6 months after the headquarters launch, ThorneTech expanded into international markets. James traveled constantly, leaving Diana to manage their charitable foundation alongside her diminishing role in the company. The distance between them grew with each passing week. During a quarterly strategy meeting, James first encountered Natasha Winters. With her sleek black hair, piercing green eyes, and Harvard MBA, the 32-year-old marketing consultant commanded attention. the moment she entered the boardroom. "Your current branding appeals to established investors," Natasha explained, her presentation showcasing glamorous visuals. "But to capture the younger demographic, Thorntech needs a more dynamic, luxurious image that speaks to aspiration, not just financial security." James found himself captivated by her confidence. When she suggested a complete rebranding strategy over dinner, he readily agreed. What began as professional admiration quickly evolved into something more dangerous. "Diana doesn't understand the new direction," James confided to Natasha during their third dinner meeting. "She still thinks we're that scrappy startup from a decade ago." Natasha leaned forward, her fingers brushing against his. "Evolution requires leaving certain things behind, James. That's just business." Meanwhile, Diana noticed the changes in her husband, the late nights, the distracted conversations, the sudden criticism of her outdated perspectives on the company. When she discovered text messages between James and Natasha at 3 a.m., her heart sank. "It's just business," James insisted when confronted. "Natasha understands the vision I have for Thorntech's future." "And I don't?" Diana asked quietly. "You're focused on the past. She sees what we can become." The following weeks brought a painful deterioration of their marriage. James moved into their beach house, claiming he needed space to think. Diana threw herself into the foundation's work, trying to ignore the tabloid photos of James and Natasha at exclusive restaurants and private clubs. On a rainy Tuesday afternoon, James's lawyer delivered divorce papers to their home. 17 years together? And you couldn't even bring them yourself?" Diana asked when she finally reached James by phone. "I thought it would be easier this way," he replied, his voice devoid of the warmth that once defined him. "The settlement is generous. You'll be well taken care of." "I never cared about the money, James. I cared about us." The divorce proceedings became increasingly hostile as James, under Natasha's influence, contested Diana's claim to company shares. In the courtroom, he barely recognized the man she had built a life with, now cold and calculating, portraying her contributions to Thorntech as minimal. Mrs. Thorne was essentially an office manager during the company's early days, his attorney argued. Her involvement doesn't warrant the ownership stake she's requesting. Diana sat silently as her history was rewritten. When the judge awarded her 15% of the company and their original home, James seemed relieved to have retained the majority of his fortune. 2 months after the divorce finalized, technology magazines featured James and Natasha on their covers. Thorntech's power couple revolutionizing the industry. Their engagement announcement came with a publicity photo shoot in their newly purchased mansion, complete with Natasha's 8-carat diamond ring prominently displayed. At a charity gala they both attended, James approached Diana for the first time since the divorce. She had arrived alone, elegant in her simplicity among the ostentatious crowd. "You look well," he offered awkwardly, Natasha clinging to his arm. "Thank you," Diana replied, her dignity intact despite the whispers surrounding them. "I hear you've started your own consulting firm?" Diana nodded. "Reynolds Advisory, small but growing." "Good for you," James said, his tone unnervingly patronizing. "I always said you had potential." As they walked away, Diana overheard Natasha's whispered comment. "She seems so ordinary without you." James's laughter in response pierced deeper than any legal document could have. That night, Diana realized the man she loved had truly disappeared, replaced by someone who measured worth only in dollars and status. Across town, as James hosted an extravagant party celebrating Thorntech's newest product launch, Natasha subtly guided conversations with key investors. With each champagne toast, she strengthened her position in James's world, carefully laying groundwork for plans he couldn't begin to imagine. "To the future," she proclaimed, raising her glass while making eye contact with an associate across the room. a silent confirmation that everything was proceeding according to schedule. The manipulation spring arrived with Thorntech's stock reaching an all-time high. James and Natasha's wedding dominated social media, a lavish affair at a French chateau with a guest list of celebrities and business titans. Diana declined her invitation, focusing instead on building her consulting business from the ground up. "You need to update your will and financial arrangements," Natasha suggested casually one morning as they lounged in their Italian marble bathroom. "Everything should reflect our marriage now." James agreed without hesitation. His trust in Natasha had become absolute, her business acumen seemingly validated by Thorntech's continued success under her marketing direction. The company's new luxury-focused image attracted wealthy investors, though longtime customers quietly complained about shifting priorities. "Diana's foundation keeps requesting additional funding," James mentioned, reviewing emails. "They're expanding their tech education program for underprivileged communities." Natasha's expression tightened momentarily. "Your obligation ended with the divorce settlement. Besides, we're investing in our Dubai expansion this quarter." When James hesitated, she added, "You can't keep supporting her pet projects forever, darling. It sends the wrong message about our partnership." The foundation's funding request was denied that afternoon. Over the following months, Natasha orchestrated subtle changes throughout James's empire. She introduced him to Vincent Blackwood, a financial advisor with impressive credentials who suggested restructuring Thorntech's holdings for tax efficiency. "These documents just need your signature," Vincent explained, sliding sophisticated legal papers across the desk. "The offshore accounts will protect your assets while reducing liability." James signed without reading the details, trusting the team Natasha had assembled. When his longtime CFO expressed concerns about the unusual transactions, Natasha convinced James the man was resistant to innovation. "He's from your early days," she pointed out. "Sometimes loyalty to old employees clouds judgment about their capabilities." The CFO was replaced within a week. Meanwhile, Natasha cultivated her public image as the business visionary behind Thorntech's evolution. Her interviews rarely mentioned James's foundational work, instead emphasizing her revolutionary impact on the company. When asked about Diana's early contributions, she skillfully redirected conversations. "The past is interesting, but I prefer focusing on Thorntech's future," became her standard response. At home, she encouraged James to disconnect from former colleagues who had known Diana. Their social circle narrowed to Natasha's carefully selected associates, wealthy, influential people who reinforced James's new lifestyle. "Bradford's new yacht is extraordinary," James commented after one weekend excursion. "Perhaps we should consider upgrading ours for the summer season," Natasha smiled. "Actually, I've already spoken with the premier designer in Monaco. They're preparing concepts for us." Each extravagant purchase drained resources while strengthening her position. James barely noticed when Natasha suggested adding her name to various property deeds and accounts for convenience. "Marriage means sharing everything," she reminded him, expertly playing on his guilt about the past. "Unlike your previous relationship, I'm fully committed to our partnership." Diana observed these developments from afar, hearing occasional updates from concerned former employees. When Thorntech suddenly terminated its college scholarship program, James and Diana's first philanthropic initiative, she recognized Natasha's influence. "He's not even the same person anymore," confided Patricia, James's former executive assistant who now worked for Diana's growing firm. "The company culture has completely transformed." On their first anniversary, Natasha presented James with documents for a surprise, a luxury resort development in the Maldives. The project required significant investment, but promised exceptional returns, according to projections prepared by Vincent. "This opportunity won't last," she urged as James reviewed the materials. "Several other investors are circling. We need to secure our position immediately." James transferred $40 million that evening, unaware that the development company existed only on paper, created 3 months earlier by Vincent under Natasha's direction. As autumn approached, strange inconsistencies began appearing in Thorntech's operations. Key client meetings were mysteriously rescheduled. Important contracts contained unusual clauses. The London office reported unidentified withdrawals from reserve accounts. When James attempted to investigate these irregularities, Natasha orchestrated a sudden crisis with their Asian expansion, requiring his immediate attention abroad. During his 2-week absence, she accelerated her plans, making final preparations with Vincent and their hidden network of accomplices. "Everything is proceeding perfectly," Natasha assured James during their nightly video calls, the Bangkok skyline visible behind her in their luxury suite. "Focus on securing the Singapore deal. I'm handling everything here." Indeed, she was, just not in the way James imagined. Each night after their calls, Natasha connected with Vincent, confirming transfers and finalizing details for their impending disappearance. "One more week," she told Vincent during their encrypted conversation. "Then Mr. Thorne discovers what happens when you discard people who truly care about you." The collapse. The annual Tech Innovation Summit, hosting industry leaders from around the world, served as the perfect backdrop for James's downfall. As keynote speaker, he stood confidently before the audience, unaware of the catastrophe unfolding behind the scenes. "Thorntech represents the future of financial technology," James declared to thunderous applause. "Our vision has always been to revolutionize how people interact with their financial futures." In the front row, Natasha smiled enigmatically, checking her watch. At precisely 2:15 p.m., as James reached the climax of his presentation, his phone began vibrating incessantly. Simultaneously, urgent messages flooded the devices of every Thorntech executive in attendance. James faltered mid-sentence as he glimpsed the screen. "Emergency! Unauthorized transfers detected." Attempting to maintain composure, he quickly concluded his speech and rushed backstage where his security team awaited with grim expressions. "Sir, we've lost contact with multiple servers," his head of cybersecurity reported. "Someone's systematically transferring assets from all major accounts. We're locked out of the system." James frantically called the bank, only to discover that authorized documents bearing his signature, had transferred ownership of their primary accounts 2 days earlier. The changes were processed according to standard procedures, the banking executive explained. "The paperwork appeared legitimate, signed by both you and Mrs. Thorne." Scanning the crowded venue, James suddenly realized Natasha was nowhere to be found. Her assistant reported she had left immediately after his speech, claiming a family emergency. Within hours, the situation deteriorated catastrophically. Thorntech's stock plummeted as news broke of a major security breach. Investors panicked. Shareholders demanded explanations, and reporters swarmed the building. Returning to their mansion, James found half the art collection missing and Natasha's closets emptied. A single champagne glass sat on his desk beside an envelope containing divorce papers, already filed with the court that morning. "This can't be happening," James whispered, his world imploding around him. Vincent Blackwood was unreachable, his office abandoned. The offshore accounts James had established showed zero balances. Properties he believed he owned were legally registered to shell corporations controlled by Natasha and Vincent. By midnight, the full extent of the devastation became clear. Over $175 million transferred or liquidated. Thorntech's proprietary technology copied and key patents challenged through previously hidden legal filings, and worst of all, evidence suggesting James had authorized everything. "These are your signatures," his attorney confirmed grimly, reviewing the documents. "And there's a digital trail showing you accessed these files and approved these transfers." "I never saw these papers," James protested. "Natasha must have—" "Perhaps," the lawyer interrupted. but proving that will be nearly impossible given the electronic evidence. The signatures were verified through your personal authentication protocols. The next morning, Thorntech's board called an emergency meeting. James watched helplessly as they voted to remove him as CEO, citing catastrophic leadership failure and potential malfeasance. Security escorted him from the building he had designed, employees averting their eyes as he passed. Media coverage was merciless. "Tech Titan toppled by trophy wife," blared one headline. Another read, "Thorne's fortune vanishes overnight. Inside, the billion-dollar betrayal." Former associates distanced themselves immediately. Friends canceled dinner plans. The luxury car dealership repossessed his vehicles when payments from his now empty accounts failed. In a cruel twist of fate, forensic accountants discovered Natasha had been siphoning funds for over 8 months, beginning exactly 1 week after their wedding. The sophisticated scheme had been expertly concealed within legitimate business operations, designed specifically to implicate James if discovered. As investigators pieced together the elaborate fraud, they uncovered disturbing connections. Vincent Blackwood had previous identities linked to investment scams across Europe. Natasha's background credentials were largely fabricated, and most damning, evidence suggested she had targeted James years before their first chance meeting. "This was never random," explained the private investigator James hired with borrowed money. "They researched your habits, your vulnerabilities, your management style. Everything was calculated." While legal proceedings began, James moved into a modest hotel room, all he could afford while his assets remained frozen. Each morning brought new humiliations. Credit cards declined, membership revoked at his club, former business partners refusing his calls. The final blow came when Natasha and Vincent were located on a private island in the South Pacific, in a country with no extradition treaty. Local authorities confirmed they had arrived with documentation for a development project backed by legitimate-appearing investment funds. "We can pursue civil remedies," James's attorney advised, "but criminal prosecution will be challenging given their location. And frankly, recovery of assets is unlikely." Alone in his hotel room, surrounded by legal papers and unanswered messages, James confronted the bitter reality. His empire, built over 20 years, had collapsed in 9 days. The man who once commanded respect in boardrooms worldwide couldn't even secure a dinner reservation. That evening, walking aimlessly through the city, James paused outside a community center. Through the window, he spotted a familiar figure teaching a technology class to a group of teenagers. Diana stood at the whiteboard, patiently explaining coding concepts, her expression animated with the same passion he had once fallen in love with. For the first time since the collapse began, James felt something beyond despair, a faint recognition of what truly mattered and everything he had foolishly discarded along the way. The restoration winter descended on the city, matching James's bleak circumstances. The bankruptcy proceedings stripped away his remaining assets, leaving him with only personal items and a small apartment rented with borrowed funds. Former business. Associates crossed the street to avoid awkward encounters. Invitations to industry events, once abundant, ceased entirely. 6 months after Natasha's disappearance, prosecutors finally assembled their case. The charges against her and Vincent included fraud, money laundering, and corporate espionage. James faced his own legal troubles. Shareholders filed suits claiming negligence, while regulatory agencies investigated his role in the financial collapse. On a particularly difficult morning, after another failed job interview where his notoriety overshadowed his qualifications, James found himself outside the Reynolds Foundation headquarters, a modest building downtown that housed Diana's expanding operations. Through the window, he observed the vibrant workspace, young professionals collaborating at communal tables, walls covered with project plans, and at the center, Diana guiding a team meeting with the same focused energy she once devoted to Thorntech. Gathering his courage James entered the reception area. "I don't have an appointment," he admitted to the surprised receptionist, "but I was hoping to speak with Diana, Ms. Reynolds, briefly." Minutes later, Diana appeared, her expression guarded but not unkind. "James, this is unexpected. I won't take much of your time," he promised. I need advice from someone who remembers who I was before everything." Something in his humble demeanor persuaded her. They walked to a nearby park, the autumn, leaves crunching beneath their feet. "I lost everything that mattered long before Natasha took the money," James confessed, staring at the ground. "I became someone I don't recognize, someone who valued status over substance." Diana remained silent, allowing him space to continue. "The prosecutors say recovery of assets is unlikely. The lawsuits will continue for years. I'm not asking for sympathy, but I need direction. How did you rebuild when I took everything away?" Diana considered his question carefully. "I didn't rebuild, James. I discovered what remained after the wreckage. My skills, my values, my purpose. Those were always mine, not ours." Her words resonated deeply, offering the first genuine guidance he'd received since the collapse. "Your technical knowledge hasn't disappeared," she continued pragmatically. "Your understanding of financial systems is still valuable, even if your reputation is damaged." Before they parted, Diana made an unexpected offer. "We need a consultant for our financial literacy program, someone to develop curriculum for teaching teens about investment safety and fraud prevention. The irony isn't lost on me, but you understand those risks better than anyone now." The part-time position paid modestly, but offered something more valuable: purpose. Teaching weekly classes forced James to articulate fundamental principles he had abandoned in his pursuit of wealth. The teenagers, unimpressed by his former status, judged him solely on his ability to explain complex concepts clearly. "You were actually good today, Mr. T," remarked one student after a particularly engaging lesson on recognizing investment scams. "Like, I actually understand why people fall for that stuff now." Gradually, James established a new routine centered around genuine contribution rather than acquisition. He downsized to a smaller apartment, sold his remaining luxury possessions, and focused on debt repayment. Evenings once spent at exclusive restaurants were now dedicated to developing educational materials or volunteering at the community center. Meanwhile, Diana's foundation expanded nationally. Her innovative approach to technology education received major funding from several tech giants, allowing her to implement programs in underserved communities across the country. When a prestigious business magazine named her Entrepreneur of the Year, the accompanying profile highlighted her resilience and vision, with no mention of James. 1 year after his downfall, James received unexpected news. Investigators had located some of Thorntech's stolen intellectual property in an overseas development firm. The recovery wouldn't restore his fortune, but it provided crucial evidence absolving him of willful participation in the fraud. "The civil penalties remain," his attorney explained, "but criminal charges are being dropped. The evidence clearly shows you were a victim of sophisticated manipulation." This legal vindication offered a pathway to professional rehabilitation. A small tech incubator, impressed by his work with the foundation, invited him to mentor struggling startups, specifically those developing security measures against financial fraud. "Your experience provides valuable perspective," the program director noted. "You understand vulnerabilities from the inside." On a spring morning 2 years after Thorntech's collapse, Diana hosted a conference on financial technology ethics. James attended as a panelist. His contribution focused on corporate responsibility and security governance. The audience, once his peers, listened attentively as he spoke without pretense about his failures and lessons learned. "Success creates a dangerous illusion of invulnerability," he explained. "I believed my judgment was infallible because of my wealth. That arrogance didn't just cost me financially, it corrupted my values and blinded me to manipulation." After the panel, Diana approached him, professional but warm. That was quite powerful, James. Your perspective is unique and valuable. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, he replied sincerely. Your foundation saved me in more ways than you. No. As they walked together toward the reception, James noticed how comfortably Diana commanded respect in this environment, not through intimidation or wealth display, but through genuine expertise and integrity. We're launching a new initiative on financial safety for seniors, Diana mentioned. Your curriculum for teens has been remarkably effective. Would you consider adapting it for an older demographic? I'd be honored, James replied, recognizing the olive branch she offered, not reconciliation, but professional respect. That evening, James declined an invitation to join colleagues for dinner, preferring to return to his modest apartment. The space contained none of his former luxuries, but held something more meaningful: peace. On his desk sat a framed photo from the Foundation's recent graduation ceremony, showing him surrounded by students proudly displaying their certificates. As he prepared a simple meal, James reflected on the extraordinary journey from wealth to wisdom. Natasha had taken his fortune, but inadvertently given him something invaluable: the opportunity to rediscover his authentic self, the person Diana had always seen beneath the accolades and acquisitions. His phone chimed with a message from a former student, now enrolled in college. Prof wants to know if that investment app I designed based on your security principles is worth developing. Thoughts? James smiled, recognizing that true wealth wasn't measured in accounts or assets, but in impact and connection. The empire he'd lost had been built on shifting sands of ego and materialism. What remained, what he was carefully rebuilding, had a foundation that no betrayal could ever destroy.